The General Distortion Podcast.
Hello. Thank you for tuning in to the debut episode of General Distortion here on YouTube. I'm your host, Johnny James, and again, thank you for tuning in. If you are listening to this right as it comes out, I'm glad you are joining me for the return of this show. This is a show that I originally started at CHSR FM, which is the campus and community radio station here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, where I am currently located. It is a place where I've gotten to become very integrated into this music scene we have here on the East Coast, and the music scene just in general, getting to just be making music a part of my day-to-day life here, and CHSR has been a big part of that. And I originally started this show with a friend of mine whose name is Sean Carroll. He plays in a couple of bands, one from Moncton, New Brunswick called Ibex, one that he's currently when he's out in BC. And he's currently playing drums in this thrash band called Chaos Century. But you already know that if you had seen the promo video for this first episode here. So this is a show that I originally started at the station. It's kind of a long-form interview show. Again, if you saw the trailer, you would know that already. But just for anyone who's fresh here or happen to stumble across this channel, my apologies. Just in their random searching on YouTube here, used to be kind of a long form interview show where we'd sit down for an extended interview with a local artist or an artist that was touring through, and we only got to do about 15 episodes before kind of fizzled out due to how busy I was at the time with school, university, all that kind of jazz. But I wanted to bring it back, and overhauling it. It's just me. I'm the only host of this now, and it's gonna be more of like just a review of like new releases, because I wanna dive deeper and talk about as much music as possible, both from local artists on the East Coast here in Canada and all across the world, all of your mainstream music as well, because no matter where you go around the world, you can find great music, and whether it's mainstream or it's an independent artist, I think there's lots of cool music to talk about here, and I want to just dive deeper into it, and I want to explore more of it, and I want to give my thoughts on more of it. So that's basically what we're going to be doing here. We'll be going over the latest albums, EPs, singles, and we'll of course have a special focus on local East Coast artists as well here, because I want to make sure, like that's kind of like the unique thing I want to bring. I want to bring this to as wide of an audience as possible, but I also want to make sure that giving the homegrown artists here on the East Coast that special spotlight. So we'll be talking about music from all those different places as we get into kind of a regular routine here. But the first couple episodes here, I wanted to kind of catch up, do a few introductions, and also bring everything up to speed as we are kind of like halfway through the year. The next episode you will hear after this will be in 2 weeks' time. If you're watching this the day that's coming out, this is coming out, where I'll be going over my best and worst releases of 2020 so far this year. Again, since we are kind of at that halfway point. But today, I kind of wanted to introduce all of you, whether you, if you're listening to this and you've known me for a while, or again, if you're stumbling across and you've never heard of me before, or if you're on the other side of the world, because that's that can happen with YouTube. There's it's a global audience, or I hope to build one with this show here, because I just want to share all the great music that I come across and give my thoughts on it. But today, so to introduce kind of get you all familiar with kind of a bit of what I'm about, towards the end of 2020, I don't think over the last 10 years, because it's been a very gradual of like me just getting deeper and deeper and paying more attention and listening closer and keeping up closer with the releases week to week and everything like that I couldn't probably definitively put together like a best of the decade like a lot of your more popular kind of music channels did. But I did write down 20 albums that I thought defined the decade for me. Now, again, this is not the 20 best, but these are 20 albums that kind of like, it shows a nice progression in my taste in music, and it also, like, it just shows, like, how I've kind of gotten to my kind of mindset towards music at this point in time, because it develops from a little bit more of, like, a little bit mainstream taste to more unique and independent artists, and definitely branching out into more genres as well. And I still hope, and that's another reason why I wanted to start the show up again, is because I want to expand my own horizons a little bit. So I think we will waste no more time and getting into these 20 albums that defined the decade for me. And I want to take you through my thoughts and my connections to these records for each one here. So we will start here with a release that came out on April 12th, 2011. I'm going to go in these in kind of chronological order by release date. Over the past decade, the 2010s here. And this first album was released on April 12th, 2011, and that is Foo Fighters with their album Wasting Light. Now, this is a great starting point because I think Foo Fighters, and more specifically Dave Grohl, embody pretty much like a little bit of everything in my music taste here. This was the record that first turned me on to the Foo Fighters, and not just this record, but also the documentary that came out with it, where it was the documentary called Back and Forth, which basically went over the whole band's career up until that point, and then at the end they had a special like last segment of that documentary reserved for the making of this particular record, which was made on tape, which I thought was really cool at the time in Dave Grohl's garage, because they wanted to have that kind of more raw, get away from the kind of like digital and a little bit tendency to kind of overproduce, and just the way that like most modern rock records or any modern music record is made, and just like a band at that status, to kind of like make that decision to have it sound raw and like embrace a recording process that is a little bit like where you can't like put a nice polish on everything. They want it to have that kind of like raw sound to it. And the fact that a band of that level was willing to do that was really cool to me at the time. And before I watched this documentary, I actually didn't know like the whole like Foo Fighters Nirvana connection and everything like that, and I didn't really know all about like Dave Grohl's story, which is basically like as much as they're like every member of the Foo Fighters and Nirvana have like their own unique stories, and they're all like incredible musicians and have their own incredible stories in their own right. It's mostly it's the story of Dave Grohl and like how he's like one of the only musicians in mainstream music that has been in two bands at that level, Nirvana and Foo Fighters, but also learning about, like, I didn't know that he had originally started out as a drummer for this hardcore band in Seattle called Scream, and that was pretty cool to me as well. And kind of knowing like the reason why Pat Smear, one of Foo Fighters' guitar players, was that he was in Nirvana and he was in Foo Fighters now, is due to the fact like he was in the Germs and he was in part of that like punk rock scene that like Kurt Cobain was a big part of, and of course Dave was a big part of. And the fact that like that's where they got their start, and now like the success that Dave Grohl has been able to kind of reach is really fascinating. It's kind of cool that like one of the bands at the top started out playing in like these dingy like hardcore venues and like really playing this special type of underground music that I really love, and that a lot and very similar to what a lot of people that in the East Coast music scene that it's the similar kind of style that they play, and playing these like cool like hardcore shows and everything like that. So that really got me into it. And like this record, now like I know this record in particular, if I want to talk about the record here, going kind of through everything here, it doesn't have as many like iconic tracks. You don't have your Learn to Flies, you don't have your Everlongs or your Breakouts or anything like that. But I really, like, after listening to their whole discography, think that this is Foo Fighters' best album still to date. They've actually kind of hit a bit of a lull in their career after this album. I didn't really care too much for Concrete and Gold or Sonic Highways and everything like that, although I did appreciate the process, especially on Sonic Highways, like that they tried of recording in like a different city for each song, so kind of have the unique feel for that city, and like using the influences of like and talking to legends in the music scene from those different cities and trying to capture that on the record. It was a great concept in theory, and again, it was something that was trying to bring a unique sound, much like the garage recording on Wasting Light, which I think definitely does. There's definitely a lot fuzzier and raw, and just a little more grittier tones from the fact that like it was recorded in a garage and it was recorded on tape, and like that definitely came through on the record. It just, the kind of like experimental like monkey wrenches they tried to throw in on the experiments on Sonic Highways just didn't land the same as Wasting Light, which starts off with this incredible building of momentum on the track Bridge Burning. That's one thing that I love about Foo Fighters, their ability to like just build momentum quickly and rapidly is a very strong muscle for this band. I'm thinking about like tracks like Best of You or Monkey Wrench, where like it's just you're constantly building up that momentum. That's what makes a lot of their songs such a thrilling listen for me. And then, of course, you have the song Rope, which has that kind of crunchy, old school production. Some great harmonies from Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins, and definitely a standout performance for Taylor as well. Just really great drum performance, some cool fills and solos throughout. And then you get into the track Dear Rosemary, which I think the fact that this wasn't one of the singles for this album really speaks to the strength of this album. I really like the harmonies on this track. It really shows a strong brotherhood between Dave Grohl and his longtime friend Bob Mould, who does a great feature on this track as well. There's some really cool, like, subtle but effective play on words on this track as well. The kind of get away, get away, get away from me, kind of like just repeating the same line and kind of like phrasing it different until it kind of has a different connotation to it. Kind of have it, like those kind of phrases and sentences that have those double meanings. They really use that to very effectively on this track as well. And then like one of my favorite things about this album is that it has probably the most visceral, gritty, and closest thing probably the heaviest thing Dave Grohl has recorded on since the Nirvana days, with White Limo, that has lyrics that are a bit weird and wacky, a lot like Kurt Cobain's lyrics used to be. Again, is one of the more visceral tracks that the Foo Fighters have ever written. I think it's the heaviest song that they have ever written. You couldn't soak it in more distortion, and there's breakneck, just a constant onslaught of fiery riffs on this one as well. And that's probably like the highlight of the record for me, and definitely one of the songs that I played the most there. But yeah, for this record, it's just like Foo Fighters are like just a band that again encapsulates like Dave Grohl like always has a bit of that kind of like hardcore, like underground, like punk energy to most things that he does, but also bringing in like, I think they're just one of the last like really authentic staples in mainstream rock, which is really fallen off, especially in the last 10 years with the likes of bands like Imagine Dragons or 21 Pilots, which I don't even have that big of a problem with the latter of those two. Imagine Dragons, I could definitely do without a lot of that in the music world here today. But just like I think Foo Fighters are just one of the last like true like rock bands, and like I think that at least as far as like mainstream artists go here, and I just think it's cool that like the band that's at kind of like the top as far as like really a like authentic mainstream rock now has a good kind of base and appreciation for the underground and indie scene, because he still brings it up in like any like interview segments and everything like that. He still like doesn't forget where his roots come from. So like it really allows me it allows a deeper appreciation, because these aren't just like they're not just a bunch of rock stars that are like, oh, they are intoxicated by the high life there, but like forget completely like they came from just where every other band came from, which is those shitty bars and doing the tour grind and everything like that, and touring around in vehicles that are constantly breaking down and barely getting paid and barely able to make ends meet here. So that's my appreciation for like the Foo Fighters, and again, this record here that they didn't want to go for like that high gloss production. They decided to kind of strip it down and make records this is almost a direct quote of what Dave Grohl actually said in the documentary, is like, make records the way they used to fucking make records. And it's cool that they were able to make such an epic rock record like this just in a garage, and it's fantastic. Another big thing, my final note on this album as well, is I think this album really signifies for Dave Grohl the first time where he was defined more for his work from Foo Fighters than he was for Nirvana, because I think he addresses a lot of things in the lyrical content on this album where he's finally like exercising any leftover feelings and sadness for the tragic passing of Kurt Cobain. And I think that's incredible. For the fact, like the song "These Days," which during the Reading headlining Reading set that they played when they were touring this album, Dave Grohl openly tributed to Kurt Cobain and Chris Novoselic. And that line, like, just easy for you to say, I think is a line that I think Dave has been waiting to write since Nirvana first split up. And then, of course, there's the track I Should Have Known as well, where Dave Grohl brings in Chris Novoselic on bass. And, of course, Butch Vig, who produced Nevermind, produced this record as well. And I remember them saying on the documentary that was the first time that Butch, Chris, and Dave had been in the same room since they had finished recording Nevermind. So that's a pretty cool moment that, again, like, it just creates a good atmosphere and like a good kind of motif that's really captured on this record as well. And the track that Chris features on is the track I Should Have Known, which both Dave and Butch talk about, is like they're definitely like addressing the kind of like things and the pain, and the kind of pain from loss, and like just the like Dave saying like, okay, like the title comes from like, oh, I should have known that things would have turned out this way, and like kind of like just coming to terms with like that like, oh, like just the way everything had played out, that they should have seen this coming a little bit farther away. And there's definitely a lot more lyrics on that song in particular that are definitely exercising the last kind of bit of demons from that loss of Kurt Cobain. So, and again, like, I think this is Nirvana's best record, Foo Fighters' best record musically, but also like just the things that it kind of like wrapped up and finally exercised from Dave Grohl's psyche definitely are finally kind of like put to rest after a whirlwind of, I think it was at this point the band had been together for about 16 years, So for about 15 years of kind of like building up this new legacy with the Foo Fighters. But again, like always having that chip on the shoulder, like, oh, you're like that dude from Nirvana. But like now I think this is the record where finally like Foo Fighters reached that status, and it's where Dave Grohl's like saying like, no, I'm the singer of the Foo Fighters now, and this is what I'm defined by now. And I think that's just really great. The next record I want to talk about was released on April 16th, 2012, and that is Toronto's Cancer Bats with their album Dead Set on Living. What's special to me about this record, Cancer Bats are definitely one of my favorite Canadian bands, and probably definitely my favorite Canadian hardcore band for sure. And there was definitely a huge phase while I was going through high school, especially, where I was definitely into the hardcore scene, and this more specifically the Canadian hardcore scene. And this record is, for most Cancer Bats fans, I think, seen as the band's best here. A big thing for this, and something that like kind of like grew my appreciation for this record, was the kind of behind the scenes documentary that they put out for this record. And there were a lot of cool things that the band talked about when it came to like just the making of this record. The first was just how tight they were with Kenny and Rats, of course. Rats being Eric Rats, who is a excuse me, legendary producer, Juno award-winning producer even, that has recorded a lot of great Canadian records, and just the production team of Kenny and Rats. Like just knowing the band's sound so well, having done their previous 2 records, and I actually got to interview Liam Cormier, which is Cancer Bats frontman, when they before one of the shows they played at Halifax Pop Explosion in 2015, which the show that I saw after that is definitely, there were a couple shows there was the show that they played at the Seahorse, and then they were one of the openers for the Dillinger Escape Plan show that was a part of that HPX. And those are definitely 2 of my more favorite live show experiences that I've had the pleasure of seeing. But I got to talk to Liam because the record that they just put out at that point in time, Searching for Zero, was the first one that they did without Kenny and Rats. So I was like kind of asking like, oh, like, so why are you changing it up? Because he talked a little bit about Dead Set on Living kind of being like the apex and like the peak record, where like both the production team and the band were like very locked in and on the same page of what the band's sound was. And this is the Cancer Bats record, where if you want to show people what the Cancer Bats sound is and what it's all about, like this is the record that you show. Liam also mentioned in the documentary, like this is like, they weren't trying to kind of make the best record with this one, but they wanted to make the best record that their fans would appreciate, and like that definitely comes through on this, and is something that I really appreciate on this. And there's another thing that they brought up. Scott, their guitar player, talked a lot about how he kind of like changes gear up, where he'll like buy a couple new guitars and a couple new pedals, and that kind of helps him with the inspiration of the writing process. And I thought that was kind of a cool little footnote, and it's just like I never considered like gear could like inspire a musician to write differently. Like I think the main riff for the opening song "Rats" on this record, Scott really attributed to like the kind of like feel for one of his guitars and like the tones that were coming out of the couple new pedals that he bought before then. So that was really cool. That was it was like a really unique form of inspiration that I thought was quite cool. Also, Jay Schwartzer, their bass player, talking about how this is like a record that like where they finally had like someone who like it wasn't just Scott playing the bass parts as well, and they're kind of like just following very linearly with the guitars and everything. And Jay really like made the effort to make sure like the bass stood out with their own unique parts that don't necessarily just have to follow the guitars all the time. So that's really cool here as well. As far as lyrics, like there's nothing like too deep lyrically. Like I think like they like a lot of the lyrical content on this record is just a lot of like you're kind of like good vibes, kind of like motivation and like kind of like just anthems to kind of like raise your fist and kind of bang your head to. But I definitely think should definitely be in the starter pack, especially since I think it is still held up after. I'm not sure. I think it's been about. I guess it came out in 2012. So in the 8 years since it came out, like I think it still really holds up. It'd be cool to see if they would do a 10th anniversary tour of this record. That would be awesome, because I think if you're gonna do like introduce someone to kind of like the history of Canadian hardcore, I think this record should at least be in the starter pack, if not considered one of the better Canadian hardcore records to come out of this country. And so it's really cool, and like just every single song is like just such an anthem. The drums and the bass, I really like how they're mixed on this record for front to back. A lot of groovy and gritty riffs here. One of my and it also has one of my favorite Cancer Bats tracks, which is the track Bricks and Mortar, which I think they always place it. Every time I've seen them, they've always placed it as either like the second or third song, kind of like after you get like that energy from the big, like whatever opening number they do, to sliding into this like earth shaking, crunchy, crushing riff of Bricks and Mortar that just makes the whole crowd want to jump up and down and shake the room. I think that's definitely a very underrated track from this band here as well. And just front back, like there's some really blistering tracks on here, like on the track Road Sick or Old Blood. Liam's does a lot of cool vocal work, especially on the track The Void, where he's doing these kind of like really cool whisper vocals to kind of open the track up and really paints a really good atmosphere before it gets into this really like heavy swing that just like has a metric ton of weight to it that the band gets into after that. And just front to back, it's nothing but bangers. Like, and it's just it's definitely like an album that is definitely as enjoyable and as good of a listen as whenever it was that I first heard it. The next record I want to talk about came out on June 26, 2012, and actually had Liam Cormier from Cancer Bats on the liner notes, I think, as either like a producer or an advisor. on this record. Anyway, like I know that Liam knows these cats really well. This is from Halifax's A Sight for Sewn Eyes, which to my and the album's called Alone Together, which I still hold as, I think, as far as metal records from the East Coast, this is definitely my favorite, and quite possibly might always be my favorite record, because as far as like metal records from the East Coast go, because front to back it's just such a unique take on hardcore and this brand of like really chaotic off-kilter metal with these really dizzying weird time signature riffs. Is really appropriate because they were one of the other bands opening up for that show that Cancer Bats was also on, opening for the Dillinger Escape Plan. And like I think this record was definitely a stepping stone for me getting into Dillinger, which I'm kind of surprised that I don't have one of Dillinger's records from the past decade on here. But like, cause that was definitely a point where like I definitely expanded the kind of like getting into that brand of kind of like very like mathcore metal with these, again, like just increasingly complex and off the wall and chaotic riffs. And this record was definitely a stepping stone for me getting into those types of bands, which is something like I really like appreciate in a metal band, which they're like just any metal band's like willingness to break free from traditional song structure and traditional like ways of like riff writing, and really getting creative as far as like the time signatures and their riffs and everything like that. And front to back, like this Sewn Eyes record is definitely it's still, again, like I enjoy listening to it as much as the first time I did. And like there's so many great tunes that still hit me as like it's just a soundtrack to releasing any like pent up aggression or anger you might have at the world, whether it's on the track Something Different, which is a blistering fast opener with this menacing guitar tone and thick distorted bass, and immediately like brings the album to a boiling point right off the bat, and then runs through a brick wall as you get into the track that Night at Dom's, which has this like dizzying opening riff with this snappy stampede of drums, and just all the instrumentals just come in. It's like a stampede of elephants, and each passage of the song like really like dynamically it stays within the root of the main riff, the main like opening riff, but all the members kind of expand on where like you hear like those same kind of few familiar notes, but Sewn Eyes was always really good at like expanding it out and like crafting these melodies, but keeping it cohesive, because there's always those kind of like root accents from wherever the track begins stays consistent throughout each song. And as the album goes on, like it just especially Josh Hanusiak, I forget, I interviewed him before. He'll be really he's definitely gonna laugh if he hears this. Josh, I'm sorry, I forget how to pronounce your last name, but Josh's vocals on this record just increasingly get more strained. You hear his voice crack more. It's like it almost sounds like he, if you do like a full album listen, that like he just ran through all of the vocals front to back, because on each as the album progresses, like his voice strains, and it's cracked, and like you can hear the pressure on his vocals, but that really adds that like kind of like desperate, really like kind of like searching for any sort of like hope or light. It just gives that really like desperate, angry, like I'm on my last legs of sanity, as he's screaming these like really, really like personal and really hard hitting, really hard hitting lyrics, and the riffs kind of follow as well, just getting more and more heavier. The songs start faster; they start at a higher speed as you go through, from the song "Burnt Out" to "Uncommon Sense," which this is definitely a standout track for me, as the intro is just a passage that really like pents up all your aggression for just a violent, euphoric release again of any like just things that you got to get off your chest here, and like that's a motif for most of this record. And while I'm not a really big fan, as far as like I enjoy a good like mosh pit and everything like that, but like the whole like crowd killing and kind of swinging your arms around. But honestly, if there was ever a track to do that to, this would definitely be the one for sure. There's also some great melodic and ambient and atmospheric passages on this record that are placed so nicely that you get to kind of like soak in the aggression from all the like crunchy and just like breakneck and heavy riffs that you hear throughout, and but then they're able to ramp right back into an even more furious riff that sounds even angrier than the one before that, all the way down to the point where like you finally get to the last track, Crooked Necks, for example, which is literally just chug heavy, almost devoid of any melody whatsoever, and it's just this coarse, abrasive chugging. Josh again screaming himself hoarse on this one. There's bouncy kind of like pummeling guitar groove on this, and like this is, and also like you like these riffs, like they're obviously like tuning wise or tone wise, that's what makes them heavy, but also like you could just feel that the whole band, whenever like each note they play, it feels like they're putting like their whole shoulders and their back, putting your back into it, because like you just, there's just like an extra bit of weight and a bit of oomph to every note they hit on this record, and it just makes me want to like go hit a heavy bag for like 30 minutes straight when I'm listening to this. And it's still from front to back, very cohesive, and a great example again of how to blend really heavy music with some great melody to kind of give it some breathing room, so you're not just constantly in this onslaught of heaviness, but like, and also just the production, and during those softer points, like the kind of like little bits of ambient noise that they put into the background, whether that's from samples or effects or anything like that, and also Ben Brennan's drumming on this is very, I think it's, yeah, I believe that is the drummer's name is Ben Brennan. I'm gonna look that up right quick here. No, Ben Brennan would be Ben Leatham. Sorry, his drumming really like is impressive on this record as well. Again, from those like fast, furious, breakneck sections, of the music to these like really chill kind of slow burning jams that again add like a great extra layer to just the emotional roller coaster that this album is and still is for me. So that's what makes it special to me here. The next record, which I would like to talk about, came out on September 4th, 2012, and that is Matt Mays with his album Coyote. Now, I know this is Matt Mays post his El Torpedo days, and I know like a lot of the records that came before it, they have a lot more of the, again, like those fan favorites, and like of course like songs like City of Lakes, for example. But Coyote, this was a record that, of course, if you are a big Matt Mays fan, you know won him the Juno for Rock Album of the Year. And I think this, still to date, front to back, well, again, it might not have as much of those real like big hits from his earlier sections of his catalog, but I think this is his most cohesive record from front to back. And I think every song, like just the way there's a lot of songs that feed into one another very nicely, like the track Airstrike into Ain't That the Truth, and from Ain't That the Truth to Take It on Faith, like those first 4 tracks, Indio, Airstrike, Ain't That the Truth, and Take It on Faith, is just a really, like, by the time you get to the end of that like opening section, it kind of feels like you've only listened to one song, but like you've packed already 4 songs, because they're so they flow so nicely from one to the other. And Matt Mays, like for most of his records, I think are great examples of this, but like this is just a great example. Like when I'm trying to describe like that kind of like East Coast rock sound, especially like the rock bands specifically here on the East Coast, like this is definitely like if I want to show them a great example, what's like the kind of like East Coast rock sound, I think Matt Mays is definitely one of the examples that you have to bring up. And of course, but yeah, like from front to back, like I don't really have too much to say as far as like each song in particular on this. I just think it's a great, I love records that again are like a nice cohesive unit. I think this is definitely a record that you have to listen to from front to back if you really want to get the most out of each individual song on this, because again, like just the themes and motifs I think flow together very nicely, and each song works off each other. Each song works off each other very well. Really like the kind of like couple of like desperado tracks where it like really sounds like the type of song that could have been in like a old like Clint Eastwood like western or something like that. I'm talking about like songs like Dull Knife, or Drop the Bombs is another one. And then you get into these kind of really dancey kind of like dance rock songs like Zeta, or Queen of Portland Street, or Stoned, and just front to back. Like I think this is just a nice album experience from front to back. And whenever I'm trying to show someone what the East Coast sound kind of is, Matt Mays is definitely one of the ones that I turn to. Not like there's a whole lot more, like don't get me wrong, there's a whole lot more like diverse sounds that I go through, but like again, like Matt Mays, I think as far as like East Coast rock is like a great example of the kind of flavor you can expect to get here on the East Coast. The next record I want to talk about was released on January 22nd, 2013. And this is a band from Calgary, Alberta, I believe, called Fall City Fall. And this is their album Victus. Again, a good example of another album that is just very cohesive from front to back. And like these cats, I got to see them at this rec center show. This little rec center show is a little bunch of cool Canadian hardcore bands. Three Crowns, I believe, played this show. If you don't know who Three Crowns is, I would definitely check them out. But Fall City Fall were just like, they just put on like such this great stage presence. Again, I think this is another stepping stone that eventually got me into like those more like chaotic, like off the wall bands like Dillinger and everything, because every riff on this record is just a whirlwind, bouncing off the walls and everything like that. From like one of the first tracks on the record, called Anxiety Attack, which lead the rhythm of the lead riff like really like embodies the song so well, because it's just sounds like you're just flopping around and going crazy and like absolutely losing your mind. And again, it's much like the Sonai's record, which is very fitting because one of the time I wish I got to see in the show, the old co-host of General Distortion, Sean Carroll, got to play a show that was headlined by Fall City Fall and Sonai's as well. And like these two bands definitely have a lot in common. And this record is very similar to Alone Together, where like it's just front to back. Like every song gets heavier, it gets faster, and like the vocals again sound like they're constantly slipping into this madness. And at this time, Fall City Fall had two vocalists, one that did like more or like those kind of like cleaner, like more like troubled sounding vocals, like he was constantly in this like state of panic or something. And then their other vocalists had this like really deep guttural growl. It almost gave, when they would play off each other and like either like repeat the same line, but like when the heavier voice comes in, it would always give like this kind of like Jekyll and Hyde feeling, which like you're screaming it out and like you have the devil or Satan or something like popping in just to kind of like emphasize the kind of torment that you're going through. And again, that's just, it's another record that's just kind of like a constant like breakdown of psyche when it comes to the attitude of each song as you get closer and closer to the end of it. You go from, again, like tracks like Anxiety Attack to Shallow Believer, where they're just wailing on these like really like overdriven open chords, and you have these raw disjointed vocals and guitars. And again, like the vocals just sounding more and more kind of mentally unstable as it goes along. The second last song, Taken, again has that vocal duo dynamic again, and really has like a really somber lead into the last track, Victus, with these kind of booming metallic drum hits with this like high pitched feedback that's just like this booming, thundering, like simple drum fills that go into Victus, which is the last track on the record. Again, more like flying open chords and these dizzying riffs as well. continues to kind of like spiral further out of control, and really like by the end of the record, it just kamikazes itself over the edge into this like really like unstable, angry place. And there are a lot of records growing up which I definitely got a very euphoric feeling from, just because they just worked so well to get rid of all that like teenage angst that I had back then. Going into the next record on my list here, which came out March 22nd, 2013, and was kind of my introductory, like this, and of course, the track Dimurge by Meshuggah definitely got me into my gent phase, and I'm talking about Northlane's Singularity, which is definitely one of the few gent records to this day that still holds up, and I think has a lot more going on for it dynamically than a lot of gent records that I used to listen to back in the day. So again, this is one that definitely holds up. The drumming on this record still blows me away to this day. Nick Peterson has really not topped himself with any of Northlane's records since then, because he's kind of like simplified his style a lot since this record. But like the opening track, like Genesis and Scarab, like there's a drum playthrough of him playing through this these two opening songs, and just the fills and like the creativity in how the drums are arranged. I watched that playthrough, I think, at least 1,000 times when I was really into this record. And this opening track especially, again, Genesis Scarab, you got like these like first hits of like that bow 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 like gent guitar, which definitely kickstarted my phase into that. Again, like those probably don't hit like as hard as they did back then, because gent is kind of a subsection of metal that definitely gets a little bit boring the more you listen to it. But again, this is definitely one of the albums that still hold up. And again, on this track, they have like this like kind of like helicopter, like Tom Morello-esque delayed guitar effect, and just like a lot of songs on this record, these really cool like lead melodic guitar lines, and these guitar tones when they do these kind of like laser beam like tapping. It sounds very like these very like futuristic tones when like it almost sounds like very I don't want to say like digital like or electric, but like it sounds like laser beams. I guess that's the best way to describe it. These like it's you have to listen to the record like just to get the kind of tones that they're doing here. And Adrian Fittipaldi, I forget how you pronounce his last name again with the last names, but their old vocalist Adrian, like he left the band after the release of this record, but his vocals on this still go so hard to this day. And his vocal delivery, like with lines like on this track, for example, the line "So you want the fucking truth," and the way he kind of like when he like repeats that, and just the way he delivers it with kind of like really like putting it in your face and like putting his foot down like as he says it, and it really just I don't know, it makes you like walk a little taller, like feel a little bit larger, and really like gives you that confidence to kind of like take on any like problem or hardship that you're enduring. And the drumming on this record gets even better with tracks like World Eater or Quantum Flux. Quantum Flux has the drums in this one go really well with the kind of earworm of the opening guitar riff to it, and the way that they build into like each kind of breakdown of each song, where it's like those real kind of like crowd pleasing riffs that would make a whole audience just want to like shake the room and everything like that. They're really good at like kind of like building momentum into each part of each one of those parts in each one of their songs on here. Another thing about Adrian's vocals is the kind of like distant, faint, clean vocals that he'd drop in, like on the verses on Quantum Flux or on Dream Awake, where like you get these like dystopian, like just this tidal wave of very metallic guitars, and these guitar leads that almost sound like they're like old like they're like it's like an old like 8-bit like video game theme song or something like that, and then it'll slow down and Nick's doing these like really cool like cymbal fills and really like subtle but like beefy drum rolls, and Adrian's like really like makes his voice go really faint and just gives a nice like atmosphere to kind of like again like soak in like the wave of heaviness that you just heard, and then ramp it right back up with no kind of like awkward transition or anything like that. And front to back, like these albums or these the songs on this album are just like real earth shaking. I know the song Masquerade, which I think was the first North Lane song that I ever listened to. The guitars on that are still menacing to this day. They had Drew York from Straight From the Path do this really cool feature that has this really kind of vicious bite to it. And again, each song like really left like this definitive like kind of like stomp your foot down impression with its lyrical content and just the kind of attitude it conveyed through its instrumentals. And of course the last song on this record as well, the song called Aspire, is just what I'd like to call a two-step anthem, which is like a common kind of like just movement a lot of gent crowds would enjoy doing to live performances of bands like this back in the day. And they definitely end off this record with a bang with that anthem there. And just I don't know, like this is still one of the kind of like your typical like gent toned albums that the riffs never really got stale, and I think there's only a handful of records from that kind of phase of modern metal that I can really say stood up. Another one of them is coming up on this list, but we will get into the next record here, which comes, I believe, this is the second East Coast band on this record, and this was my song, or this was my album of the summer in 2013, when it was released just in time. June 11th, 2013 was when the incomparable Acknowledge from Moncton, New Brunswick's The Motor League came out. And this record still, to this day, is one of my favorite East Coast records, because every song on here is so unique, but again, still while having that cohesiveness that I really enjoy in an album from front to back. And each song like is just again, like it's a cohesive record, but like each song definitely can stand very much on its own 2 feet. Starting off with the track "Good Men," which is the first Motor League song that I ever heard. That comes in with these kind of like distant, echoing drums and these kind of piano toned guitars, I think, to kind of open it up. And it flies into this kind of punky chord progression. They do a really good job, like from their first album, Black Noise, which definitely has a lot more like punkier anthems on that. They definitely take the best parts of that while making a really good rock record as well. So like again, the track "Good Men" like goes into this punky chord progression. Don Lavandier has like these really cool, like passionate vocals that again almost like crackle a little bit in his own unique way, but like it really fits the music, and it really gives like this really hearty kind of impassioned pride, I guess. There's a lot of, like of these, like a lot of vocals on this record, and the harmonies as well, that like just like reek of like that good kind of coastline Canadian pride, I guess. That like really give a unique feel to each song that they're on. And of course, and back to "Good Men," going through those vocals, and you have these emphatic, like climbing guitar chord progression to end it off, and it's just a really great opening track to this record before it gets into this very punchy tune called "Litany for the Completely Forgettable." Again, it has like those like cool harmonies, and again like something that I can only describe as like very East Coast, like the harmonies that the band does on this song in particular, and songs like "Every Man Needs a Cape Breton." Like just I don't know, they just have this kind of like hearty pride, of this hearty Canadian pride to them, and it kind of sounds like it's definitely something you'd like to like just raise a beer to and sing along with a room full of people, which is really where like those two songs in particular, like that's the best way to hear those songs is live, especially "Every Man Needs a Cape Breton," which has some great East Coast references in it, like "The Causeways That Carry Me Home," "We'll Be the Men Our Fathers Weren't, We Might Die Young, But We Won't Get Hurt," which is definitely an attitude that's very relatable in this section of the country. And then you get into kind of like these really, again, kind of like lonesome, like "Walk Down a Lonesome Road" kind of anthems, like "Oh How the Mighty Have Fallen," or the ending track "Burn in Effigy," which is has just like this, like it's paced by this really cool like snare roll pattern, and has this like just very, again, these like kind of like piano toned guitars, which sound very lonesome and reflective and empowering. It's one of those songs that kind of like inspire you, that you kind of use to kind of inspire and motivate yourself as you're like driving down this like long boring stretch of highway, going from like one city to another, or like you're just kind of like on the roads just trying to like make it, or like make something of yourself and everything. And then probably my favorite parts of this album are the really heavy like top string riffs on songs like "We Are All Going Directly to Hell," which has this like towering rolling riff, these thick beefy drums and huge chords on the verses, and very nice. Like again, like builds up this really like huge tower of momentum, but like it's just a really like huge sounding song that really like it still hits hard to this day. We Are Chemical is another example of this, with again just this like furious but catchy at the same time, kind of infectious top string riffs. And then you have songs that again like kind of go back to that punk attitude, which I think the best example on this is the song Cry Havoc, which has again this high flying kind of like in your face kind of energy to it. And I don't know, like it's just there's it kind of like scratches like every itch on like the range of like sounds that I enjoy in music. And I guess that's just a really long way of saying that I really enjoy this record. And again, like for 2013, like this song, like the summer of 2013, this album was on repeat nonstop in my car. I know I did a lot of like traveling from my hometown in Pictou County, Nova Scotia, on buses and stuff like that, or like going to like different shows and everything. And this was definitely something I had in my ears for the duration of that summer. So shout out to the Motor League for just making an incredible record full of great anthems that still hold up to this day. So I guess the next record, I'll go through this next one a little bit quicker. This came out March 11th, 2014, and that is Lost Together, Lost Forever, by this UK metalcore / gent band called Architects. And again, this is probably the other band, like them and Northlane are probably like the two bands that, and I guess August Burns Red probably as well, that they're the more classic records of their discography are really like the only ones from like that gent phase that are still holding up. And I think Architects are still releasing like great records to this day. Like the two records they put out after this were definitely still as hard hitting as this one, but like this was the first one. I remember listening to the lead single Naysayer, which just like the chorus of this was so like, you want to talk, like I've talked a lot so far, like when I was talking about the Fall City Fall and Sonai's records, about like those vocals where it just sounds like they're just ripping the vocal cords, just trying to get across the emotion that they're trying to convey. And Sam Carter, the vocalist for Architects, does a great job on multiple tracks on this, whether it's Gravedigger or Naysayer or Broken Cross or The Devil Is Near or Cancer. Just full throttle, like just throat shredding vocals that I know this is a band that like has a lot of like really supercharged political views. A lot of them like are on the environment, which is conveyed nicely here, especially on the track Colony Collapse, which is a lot about like how like our society, like if we don't take care of the environment, is going to kind of collapse in on itself if we don't do something. It's very much one of those kind of environmental messages on that song. But again, just every single track and like all the screams on this record are again just so hard hitting. And while it does have like those gent tones, there's a lot more. Like it's not just like wailing on the top string or anything like that. Like they use that tone, and are still pretty like creative as far as like writing with the rest of their guitars and like the rest of their instrumentation. Like there's Definitely a lot more dynamics than most bands that came out of this gent era. So again, like this is just another record that are one of the few from that kind of phase in my life that still hold up. And it's very same for the next album on this list, which is Structures and their album Life Through a Window. Now, I believe this is the last gent record that I have on this. Again, like there was a very definitive phase in my kind of music listening habits when I was growing up that definitely went through this. This album like hasn't aged the best. There's definitely a little like some different things about like the production that are a tad bit overproduced, and I think the lyrics on this record don't really hit me the same way as they used to, but still like Structures again, like building up like the two kind of themes that I really talked about as far as my listening of metal and everything. I really like those chaotic riffs, and then had my gent phase. So Structures kind of embodied like both of those because they definitely incorporated a lot of like weird off-kilter time signatures. Hardly ever followed a really linear song structure, especially on the track The Worst of Both Worlds, which has this kind of like electronic squealing lead section of guitars, and it's just like soaked in this heavy amount of distortion that it feels like you're kind of like, it almost sounds like the embodiment of like what a computer virus would sound like. I guess that's my best way of describing like the guitars and instrumentals on that. And then there's the song like Earth Gazing, which is probably one of my favorites off this record, because it comes in with this really kind of weird like bouncing progression of guitar notes to kind of like but it's still like it fades in a little in a way. It's a bit hard to explain, but it's just like there's some like really weird instrumental sections on this record that I think was like my main kind of attraction to it. And then they have like, of course, like absolutely like high flying bangers on this one, like My Conscience, or Buried was another one, and I think Alien was another one too, where it's just like it's very like fast paced, and again like a lot of those off kilter riffs. Again, like was just another like mostly this album is on this list for the same reason My Architects was. It's very just another one of those gent albums that really held up. Next, an album released on July 8th, 2014 is the debut album from the band 68, which is called In Humor and Sadness. Now, for this record, basically is one of the records that started my love of a two-piece band. I love the dynamic of a two-piece band. There's, I believe, one or two more two pieces that show up on this list. Of course, 68 is fronted by Josh Scogin, who is very well known for fronting legendary hardcore band The Chariot, which disbanded a couple years prior to 68 becoming a thing. And I've had a chance to see this band live, and absolutely blew me away. They were opening for August Burns Red when I saw them in Montreal for August Burns Red's 10th anniversary album tour of their album Messengers. And 68 were the first band on. They only played like 20 or 25 minutes, but they absolutely blew my mind with the amount of creativity. Even more on their latest record, Two Parts Viper. Like Josh Skogan using like pedals to like affect and delay his voice and everything like that. But this first record here was just like a lot of it, like a lot of the music, like almost sounds like improvised, like it's just off the cuff, and he's just wailing on his guitar, like, and like just the way that they really embrace like the use of feedback and like little snappy, like chaotic drum fills, and again, like not following that linear trajectory of your typical your typical song. And like in Humor and Sadness, again, like I don't have a lot to say like track by track, because like it was just something really totally different. Skogan's vocal delivery is very, again, like non-linear, and is just it's like definitely like the same kind of like vocals that he carried over from the Chariot, but like making it work in this like two-piece dynamic, embracing that on some like softer, like mellower tracks, and again like really embodying like some deep dark emotions through his voice too. And and the dynamic of 68 is just, I don't know, it started my love of two-piece bands, and I just love like the way like bands like use like in like feedback, and like not just like you're straight up like playing straight up riffs or chords or anything like that. Like really like the use of noise and everything throughout this record front to back is something that really stuck to me. So I definitely highly recommend that you check this record out. There's not too much I have more to say on that, other than that just it's a great example of like a great use of noise to make a very unique sounding rock / hardcore record here. The next album I want to talk about came out on October 14th, 2014, and that is Revocation's Deathless, which was a breath of fresh air to a lot of traditional metal tropes that have like they have their place and everything, but like a lot of the bands that use them today are the ones that kind of like made them popular back then, like whether it's a Metallica record or if it's like a Judas Priest record or something like that. And we haven't had many like new bands giving a fresh new take on those like old like classic like thrash and death metal until Revocation's Deathless, which front to back is like from the guitar tones to Dave Davidson's vocal delivery and his guitar playing as well. Phil Dubois' drums on this album as well are just absolutely masterful, and just it's a great kind of like revitalization of all those like old school like thrash metal elements, and front to back like giving them like a new kind of modern twist, either speeding them up or giving them again that kind of like off kilter feel, uh, giving like approaching the way like they're used for grooves, like especially on the tracks like Scorched Earth Policy or Madness Opus. A lot of the kind of there's some really cool gang vocals on this album as well that give a new kind of like sinister tone for the music to be set to. And just front to back, this album was just a fresh new take on a lot of old school metal elements, which I can really appreciate. And they kept on, and they've been able to keep doing that on records past this, like Great Is Our Sin. And it's I don't know, it's very again, like revitalizing all of those old thrash metal tropes, and giving them some new life and bringing them to like a new audience that can appreciate that style of metal that for the most part is definitely not as prominent in today's metal scene as it used to be. The next record I want to talk about is Kilnharn Psalms, which came out on November 5th, 2014, from Cambridge, Ontario's Grubert. And again, another two-piece bass and drums this time with bassist Marc Bourgeon and drummer Steve Vargas. Now, more than just this record, what's really special about this and for this band as well, it's just a great project and a great band with two very important figures in the kind of more underground metal scene here in Canada. Of course, Marc Bourgeon being a part of the legendary grindcore band Fuck the Facts, and Steve Vargas doing his thing on projects like The Great Sabatini. There's this other really cool project called Bipiguan, which is just like as gruesome and as gritty and brutal as grindcore and death grind can get. And these two coming together on this, in this kind of, again, in that two-piece dynamic. And this is the first album that I heard from them and was absolutely just blown away by the kinds of tones and the writing that Mark was able to accomplish with just a bass guitar, but like delivering a record front to back that's just as heavier, if not heavier, just as heavy, if not heavier, than a band with like two guitars, a bass, and a big fucking massive drum kit and a separate screamer on top of that. And both of them do these incredibly like menacing, like almost like caveman like vocals from front to back on this album and their other albums as well. They even improved on this further with their follow-up to this release called Cemetery Preston, which is just a masterclass in this like the underground, like the grindcore, sludge, doom metal. If you like that kind of stuff, Grubert and Marc Bourgeon and Steve Vargas those are names and things that you need to remember and to follow the work that they've done. Even though like it still just scratches the surface of like the underground scene here, I think those two are very important figures in some of my favorite Canadian metal bands here. And again, like if you like just follow, like if you go back and like look at their work and research like the bands that they've toured with, like and you'll uncover like just how great the underground scene in this country actually is. Um, like it's that kind of network that that's what have fueled the touring and the works from a band like Hard Charger, which is a great punk band here in Fredericton, and so much more. Any bands that you see at like Quebec Death Fest and Maryland Death Fest and everything like that, like this or Obscene Extreme, are all they're all cut from the same cloth that a band like Grabert is. So highly recommend you listen to this album and Cemetery Preston as well. But yeah, that's why this album is such an important one to me, because it turned me on to a lot of Mark and Steve's work, and definitely don't regret going down that rabbit hole of all the great music and in the underground scene that those two are surrounded by. Going on to our next record here is where I kind of is these next two records actually. Definitely when I'm starting to expand, there's been a lot of metal in the first half or so of this list, and this is where I'm starting to kind of expand into hearing some more alternative, some more R&B, some more soul, a little bit more jazz influenced music and everything. And of course, this is a band I think that turned a lot of people on to that style, and that is album that came out April 21st, 2015. That is Alabama Shakes' Sound and Color. First time I heard this band, a friend of mine showed me a performance of theirs. They played Give Me All Your Love and Don't Want to Fight off this record on Saturday Night Live. And the absolute insane vocal prowess of Brittany Howard, and the range and just the moving qualities of her voice absolutely floored me. I will trip over myself to see this band live if they ever make a return. I know they're on a bit of a hiatus right now. Brittany doing some solo stuff and that side project. She does a great side project called Thunder Bitch that you should check out. But sound and color, and those two songs in particular, Don't Want to Fight and Give Me All Your Love, were such a great usage of subtlety, simplicity, and how you can create so much by just taking advantage of every single moment in the length of a song. Every note, every hit of the drums, bass, every high note that Brittany goes into, and the grooves, and when the band all comes together, they all hit their mark in such a great way that and every note really means something. And as you go through this entire album, songs like Future People, songs like Sound and Color, This Feeling, all just are the meticulousness around each song here, and how they're able to most of these songs are of a pretty slow nature, but have floored me in such incredible ways, more than most rock songs, or most more high octane songs have ever done. And that's why this album really resonates with me, and I really wish, and I hope that Alabama Shakes comes back to do a follow up, because the fact that we only got 2 records out of them is just it sucks. It's definitely a band that I wish definitely would have had a longer life than it did, for sure. The next record I want to talk about came out on January 15th, 2016. The breakout album from Anderson .Paak with his album Malibu. Now, personally, as an Anderson .Paak fan, I think that his albums Oxnard and Ventura are much more like cohesive and complete projects. But this, of course, like is a defining album, of course, because it was his breakout. It did get him like kind of out of the shadow of like he had been like one of the main feature artists on the Compton project that Dr. Dre produced, or that Dr. Dre wrote and produced. And of course, Dr. Dre obviously went on to produce Oxnard as well, and I think he did. I'm not sure if he did Ventura or not, because I know those songs were cut during the same like session times as Oxnard was. But this first record right here, for me, it was a tiny bit of like a hipster moment for me, because that kind of like, oh, I knew about this guy before. He was cool because Anderson .Paak was one of the producers on this album called All You Can Do, which is by a rapper named George Watsky, who is a rapper that got famous off of some viral videos on YouTube, but is now a full-fledged hip-hop artist himself. And one of his albums might actually be appearing on this list a little further down. But Anderson .Paak did some great features, of course, doing that thing, like doing his thing with drumming and singing and rapping, all simultaneously. Was a part of the production on that album, and was really like one of like the things that made that album unique. And then Malibu right here just has such the diversity on this album, where you have your real kind of like poppy jams, like Lightweight, and then you have that kind of like funk R&B in a song like Come Down, and then soul on songs like this season / Carry Me and The Bird. And just he's a renaissance man. Like Anderson .Paak is this generation. Like I want to say like almost like a Michael Jackson in a way, just from like being like so multi-talented. Like not obviously like Michael's thing was kind of like singing and dancing, but like Anderson .Paak, like the drumming and the fact that he's a master showman, a rapper, singer, in multiple different styles, and all of them are on like the same par, and the creativity and the songwriting is there too, and it just, he's a special artist, and I think an artist that the world is going to be beloved with for a very long time. And this first project, like I'm glad that it took off as much as it did, because I think the world really needs more artists like Anderson .Paak, like again, like bringing, and Alabama Shakes was a lot like this too, like is like bringing those very like soulful and these very classic and like beautiful genres of music, like even more to the forefront. And like it's built kind of like the way it's kind of influenced a lot of like similar artists I think Anderson .Paak has had a huge impact, and it's going to be very exciting to see his career progress over the next decade and the decade afterward, because just the level of talent and the diverse nature of his talents is almost unmatched by anybody else in music right now. So speaking, I had mentioned Anderson .Paak being the producer and one of the main feature artists on one of Watsky's projects. Well, it's not that album, but the album that followed that. Times Infinity by Watsky is the next album on my list. It came out on August 19th, 2016. And this record is a perfect example of a multifaceted, multimedia, and multimedium piece of art, because it's not just the record from front to back here and like the way it's crafted, which the thing that impresses me the most about that is Watsky, before he went viral with his like fast rapping videos and everything, was on a show on HBO called Def Poetry Jam, which he didn't win, but I think he did pretty, if I remember correctly, he did pretty decently on. But he was a spoken word poet. Like, he would travel around to college campuses around the States, performing like spoken word gigs. That was his thing before he ever became someone who was interested in hip hop and rapping. And he had done like on his albums before this, like All You Can Do and Cardboard Castles, he had done like he had sprinkled some spoken word tracks in amongst these albums, like maybe towards like the back half, or I think there was a good spoken word one that he used to end off All You Can Do, and it kind of like gives like a cool little break and a cool little like change up through his records and give it a unique feel. But on Times Infinity is where he really combined the two, and really brought the two of them together. And like there's a bunch of these tracks where he's using a lot of those like spoken word skills and rapping, and including them on the same songs like Talking to Myself, or songs like the Conversations, Knots, Roses, and Theories, and Yes Britannia, which is has this like kind of weird like ballerina, like kind of the tune that you would hear in like a music box or something like that, and he's rapping and doing some spoken word passages over that, and really like bringing his two skills together. And then on top of all of that, the music videos he released for this album, which he like first released them like separately, but then released it as like a full album film, and like filmed extra things to kind of like make them all kind of be one cohesive, like a short film that went along to the tune of the album. And even like everything down to like even like the packaging on like the deluxe version of this album, like folded out, and you could make this like light box with like extra pieces of album artwork and everything, and just all the other like cool things, like the like there's a passage like there's a section of the album called Lovely Things Sweet, and then it's part 1, 2, and 3. It's I believe it's Knots, Roses, and Theories, that he did a 3D video of him performing that section of the album with an orchestra, and just the way that he was able to expand on and take what was just like just a recorded piece of music, a recorded album, and expand it and add like 5 or 6 other different dimensions to it is something that always appreciate I'll always appreciate about Watsky, and like his progression of albums as well. Like he's always trying to throw like cool new wrenches in there and like expand on the music to make it even bigger than it already is, and like and bring it in multiple artistic forms. And it's just something like when I can look back and I can watch everything that he kind of built off of this album and expanded on this album with, and it still puts a smile on my face to this day, and it's an artistic endeavor that I certainly will never forget. So the next this next entry on my list is a series. It's a 3-album series, the only spot on this list that has this. And these 3 albums came out between June 9th, 2017 and December 15th, 2017. And that is, of course, the best boy band since One Direction, Brockhampton from Texas, with Saturation 1, 2, and 3. And this is on this list because these 3 albums have been, first of all, in constant rotation with me on any road trip I've gone on for like the past, well, since they came out. So like it's been 3 years since it came out. It's been 3 years that like, and these albums just have such a lasting, sticky quality to them that just never gets old. Like Saturation 1, which just has, still to this day, has some of the band's best songs and just such a hard-hitting breath of fresh air for the hip-hop and pop music scene. And then you have Saturation 2, which has some of the most catchiest earworm songs, some of the biggest bops you could possibly ask for, and is just front to back like such an entertaining album. And then Saturation 3, taking everything from the first 2 records and putting a new alternative twist and bringing a lot of things out of left field. The start to each one of these albums has some of the most like well-written, hard-hitting songs I've ever heard in my entire life. So like for Saturation 1, for example, you have the first 3 songs as Heat, Gold, and Star. Heat with this like really ruthless bass tone beat. You have a really cutthroat verse from, unfortunately, due to some very horrible allegations that were confirmed, an ex-member in Amir Van, with a really cutthroat verse on this track. You have Joba absolutely foaming at the mouth with this like aggressive, angry, fuck you, I'll break your neck so you can watch your back, just foaming at the mouth. And like all of his performances across these 3 albums are such like diverse. It's hard to believe that all of these performances come from the same guy. He's definitely one of the more standout members from these first 3 albums from the band. And then you got like the animated delivery of Merlin Wood on this track, and many others, just giving that playful but still just as hard-hitting verses. And then you have a song like Gold, where you have the very poetic Don McLennan just dropping some really cool, very smooth bars. Matt Champion bringing a lot of swagger to this song. A great hook, lots of great hooks across these 3 albums by Kevin Abstract, who, if you don't know, also does a bunch of solo material that you all should definitely check out as well. And then you have bangers like Star, where just these pop culture heavy bars, another really bass heavy beat, and then you have Kevin's verse about kind of like throwing it in the face of people who didn't like get on board from kind of day one, and he's kind of dunking on his haters, and it gives that really iconic line in the Brockhampton fan base about giving somebody head, which really pissed off and kind of exposed a lot of homophobia in the hip hop scene, with all the bunch. I've seen countless reaction videos to this where like some people are very like off put for some reason by it, and it's just just bringing up like those topics, like Kevin. It's always been a big selling point of his about how open he is about his sexuality, and like how open he is about it with his music, which is a really great quality. But like, there's so many other things about all the members of this group, and then on each of these albums, you have these like really like blissful slow ballads, mostly performed by Bareface, which is this like if you don't know what he looks like, he's just got this like kind of like gruff beard look. He's got like some like religious like chains and some cross earrings in. He's kind of got like a little bit of the old school Justin Bieber hair going on, but like is just able to belt out these beautiful, blissful ballads that are very, very, very pleasant on the ear. And then, of course, like in Saturation 2, you have like front to back, like some of the most catchiest songs from like the openers, Gummy and Queer. Very underrated bop in Swamp, which has probably the best hook on these three albums, done again mostly by Kevin with the help of Matt. You have these really like summery tracks like Tokyo and Jesus, which has some great kind of higher ranged flows from Joba. Jesus having this really nice, simple but very beautiful piano, and Bareface just again like making it sound beautiful with like these very balladry tones that he has. And then you get into the other half of the second record, where you have the song Junkie, which I think is definitely the most unique. It's still the most unique song to date from Brockhampton. You have Amir doing, again, a very cold verse about drug addiction. Kevin with his open, again, with another hard-hitting verse about the kind of abuse the LGBTQ community endures, and his experiences growing up and coming out as gay. And there's these fuzzy, staticky tones that kind of break down in between Kevin and Amir's verse that ramp up the momentum of the song and into this very like hard hitting, kind of very eerie, haunting beat. And then at the end of it, you have verses from a verse from Joba again that is sounds very disturbed. And then Matt Champion comes in and gets really intense with this really calculated verse about sexual and domestic violence. And then you have Don McLennan coming in, finishing with this fury of a flow to just like, there's so many layers upon layers to this one song that like it's definitely my favorite Brockhampton song to date, for sure. And then on Saturation 3, you have the absolutely blistering opener Boogie, which has these like really like loud like squawking sirens and horns, and is just like probably the best hype song you could possibly ask for. and that goes into an equally catchy song in Zipper, and then breaks down with these like really like laid back kind of alternative jams like Liquid or the fan favorite Bleach, which again has some like, which is like, they're definitely their best kind of blend of rap and pop, and it's definitely like probably their most accessible song, but while still being having a lot of like artistic qualities to it. And then you have like really like just weird off the wall, like very experimental tracks like Hottie or Sister Nation, or even Rental has some great qualities to that. Just front to back, like this is like a collection of songs that I've listened to front to back, like all three albums, like right in a row, and I still don't get sick of it. There's a very lasting quality, and this is a very game-changing group, and I think this group will go down as one, like, especially like since they're just getting started. Over the next decade or so are going to be like, I don't want to put them on the level or like the iconic nature of like a Wu-Tang Clan, but like I can't think of another group. Like, they get a lot of comparisons to Odd Future, and I get that, but I think Brockhampton, like, and even just their like aesthetic, like in their music videos and everything, again, like another group like really expanding on just the music to make it a full like multi-dimensional piece of art. There's no one that really does it like this group here. Like, no group has, they have like what, 13 or 14 members, and they consider their producers just as much members of the group as the actual artists on that perform on stage. And just again, that dynamic is something we've never seen before. So I think like just how unique this group is, they're going to be a group that's around for a very long time and are going to have a lasting impression on the music scene regardless of how long their career is. The next album came out on September 22nd, 2017. This is a Canadian band from BC called Archspire with their album Relentless Mutation, which was my favorite record which is one of my favorite records of 2017. And just because like it, I've very like, there's like in the metal community, like of course there's all like the kind of like, you get into these like subgenre wars and everything like that, like, oh, you like thrash metal or speed metal or death metal or grindcore or Swedish power metal or something like that. One of my favorite kind of like rabbit holes to go down is tech death, and I don't think there's a band in Canada that does tech death quite like Archspire does. Again, I don't have a lot to say like as far as like track by track on this one, but like just front to back, like the vocals on this are kind of like they're almost rapping with the like how many like the words per minute and everything like that is, but like while doing like these like really intense like inhaling screams, and just the fury and blistering nature of the instrumentation on this album as well, especially on tracks like Human Murmuration or Remote Tumor Seeker, are just incredibly blistering. And I've never, like, at that point that I heard this record, I hadn't heard anything that was quite that fast or that blistering. So that's why this record lands as a really good, distinct footnote in my progression as a listener of music. Next is another local here from the East Coast. Originally, I believe she's from New Brunswick originally, but was based in Halifax for the longest time, now based in Toronto. And that is Jessie Brown's Keeping Appearances, which came out on September 29th, 2017. And the attractive quality about this record is Jessie's voice, which I could only describe as a mix between Freddie Mercury, Janis Joplin, maybe a little Aretha Franklin in there as well, but like a great and equal balanced blend of dynamics, range, and soul, and one of the best voices I've ever heard, like, put to a rock record. And this record right here, Keeping Appearances, again, another record that is very cohesive front to back, and is a lot of song by song, like breaking down this very toxic relationship that Jessie was in, which she told me a little bit about when I did an interview with her at the ECMAs in Halifax a couple of years ago. But just some great songs that are really very uplifting and turning a lot of motifs about taking these dark things in life and trying to process them and turn them into something better, but also like kind of like processing them properly and not just, like the title says, keeping appearances. You got songs like Debt, We Ain't Got No Money, which I know is like a song about the person she was in that toxic relationship with, actually like leaving her in a bunch of debt. And then you have really like kind of reflective and really great songs like Someone Else and Regret. And then you have like those tracks that are really like kind of like processing that darkness more, which is most definitive on the song Undertow, which has a great music video, by the way, that you should check out. Very much most of the video is like submerged and bubbling underwater and everything, and has these great there's a great band dynamic with her, like accompanying musicians, mostly from Jason Vautour, who plays bass on this record, but has this like really like kind of like acid soaked, very warpy bass tone throughout this album. And like on Undertow specifically, it's used very well to kind of like give that feeling that you're kind of trapped in this abyss and being suffocated by the world around you. And then of course Debt is a very moving anthem, as well as the track Voyeur. Album also has some very internally charged soul songs, like That's What Happens and Something Else, and Someone Else, sorry. And it's just an album that really sifts through the Rolodex of human emotions, and handling some emotions aggressively and others with like gentle and with a very strong motif of self-care, and and the vocal delivery on like every single track really is really comforting when it needs to, but very like gritty and powerful when it needs to be as well. And it's a great record, and probably one of the better albums that I've heard from this part of the country. And is a great example of, again, like taking a dark experience and turning it into a very positive piece of art. I think the track that stands out the most to me on this album is the track Regret, where it breaks down into this kind of when they're doing these harmonies, and it's a very raw recording. Apparently it was actually recorded, Jesse had told me that it was recorded, she recorded like a video on her phone, and the audio from that was better than the microphone that they had set up, so that's what she kept for the ending song. And it just like and it was a perfect moment just to strip everything away and have that nice harmonizing section that really amplified the emotions coming off of that song. And I think this whole album does a great job at just like it's an emotionally powerful and very moving record. And definitely when I'm like introducing and I want to like very like shine some light to someone new on the just immense amount of talented artists we have here on the East Coast, this is definitely one of the first albums that I pull out for sure. Second last album on the list came out June 8th, 2018, and that is Kids See Ghosts, which is the collaborative project of none other than Kanye West and Kid Cudi. And this is a perfectly packaged album in the way that it's only like 20-25 minutes in length, but it feels like it has the impact and depth of like an hour long or like a 50 or 60 minute record. But like it's just, again, one of those meticulously crafted albums that you can tell that every single beat and bit of instrumentation, every sample, every vocal line was recorded and very like meticulously crafted from front to back. Whether it's the opening track, Feel the Love, which has these bombastic, aggressive gunshot vocals coming from Kanye, a really good feature from Pusha T, and then you have tracks like Fire, where Kid Cudi is doing his like signature humming thing, but it sounds so much more like locked in and in tune and on pitch than any of his like previous like solo material, which hadn't been that spectacular up to this point. And then you got tracks like Reborn, which is just one of the most uplifting songs and was one of my favorite songs of that year. And you got like a very personal verse from Kanye that is reflecting the kind of like toxic and very self-destructive media image in the media, like kind of like news cycle like that's revolving around him. And it almost seems like regardless of what you think of Kanye West as a person, like he definitely doesn't seem like someone I would ever be too keen to meet in the future. Definitely seems like someone who could probably benefit from a bit of a better circle around him, a little bit less attention, because there are some very troubling mental health issues that are definitely reverberating off it. And it almost seems like he intentionally puts himself into these and like self-sabotages in this toxic way in order to like have something to write about. Like he's almost like his own self-image as like this sacrificial lamb that he needs to keep burning to the ground in order to kind of have a redemption arc to make fantastic records like this. And I'm not like, whether you agree with me or think that sounds absolutely stupid, that's the way I kind of perceive a lot, like just the aura that is Kanye West. Because like, and it's worked on a couple different occasions, like my Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, like still a great album to this day, but like I think this is definitely the best thing that to date. And just front to back, like it's just, again, from track to track, and everything flows so seamlessly on this album. It's very psychedelic, it's very trippy, and is just like one of the most tasteful listens I think I've had of any hip-hop record, or any record in general, to be quite frank. And that's why it is included on this list, because it's very impactful and very unconventional for any hip-hop or rap album as well. And that's what, when it comes to hip-hop and rap, I'm very like, I'm not as in tune with the classics as most like purely bred like kind of hip-hop heads are. Like, when it comes to hip-hop, like I really like go towards like the more kind of experimental, and this is definitely probably the best example of experimental hip-hop that I've come across. And finally, we will end off with a local favorite, and the reason why this album is on this list is it embodies the beautiful weirdness of a music scene that has taken me in, been very accepting and welcoming, and it's just been great to get to know so many great and unique artists within it here in Fredericton. And I think this band really wears what, like, that kind of mission statement that defines the Fredericton scene as a badge of honor on themselves. And of course I'm talking about Motherhood's Dear Bongo, which is again like a beautifully weird album. And that's a way you could probably describe most of their music, because it is, you really never know what you're gonna get with this band right here. Like, if you look through their discography, like the way they reinvent themselves on each and every project is really something, and something I really appreciate when it comes to an artist or a group being able to just, like, you have a completely different sound from project to project. A little bit of backstory on this. So basically, like, Dear Bongo, it's there's a bit of a theme to it. It's about telling a story of a painter who is reeling from the end of his latest relationship and seeks solace in alcohol and his craft. Bored of a typical canvas, he paints rooms. Other artists paint colors, most of which now seem flawed to his obsessive eye. It's a meditation on the strident need for perfection in an imperfect world. And it's, and yeah, and like, it's, and definitely reflected really well front to back on this thing. And there's just a lot of really cool, unconventional ideas on Dear Bongo. From the opening track, Bird Chirp, which has this really cool kind of rolling, rocking bass and guitar groove. It's really catchy. But like, then the delivery on the verses from their vocalist Bryden Crane is just it's got this kind of like this kind of like I don't want to say like hillbilly twang to it, but it's got a little bit of like one of the lyrics in this song, a little bit of country bumpkin in it, but still rocks really hard on like other tracks, like Way Down and Costanza, and or the song Hallway. One of the standout tracks for me is this very this instrumental that kind of like sounds like a psychedelic fever dream called Sweet Kid, where just the tones from all the instrumentation on this are very, like, it's very intriguing. Like, again, like you really don't know what you're gonna get from track to track. And then you got a song like Pick of the Pugs, which has almost like a very playful, like youthful quality to it. Like very, very silly, and like definitely doesn't, there's a lot of, especially like vocally, like it, vocals that like definitely don't take themselves like too seriously or anything like that. But then when they get into like the really like hard hitting, rockin' parts on this album, they still hit really hard with like some really kind of like off-color screams and everything like that. And yeah, like this is just like, again, like if I was to tell you specifically about the Fredericton music scene, this would be one of the first albums that I would show you, because I think it will definitely set your expectations for the beautiful weirdness that is the Fredericton music scene, and a lot of and is something that's just, I don't know, it's very defining, and the Fredericton music scene definitely has a special place in my heart after living in it for the last few years. And yeah, so that is my list of the top 20 albums that define the 2010s for me. I want to thank you all for listening to the first episode of General Distortion. If you liked the episode, please hit the subscribe button down below. The next episode will be dropping in 2 weeks on August 19th, where I'll be going over my best and worst music from the first half of 2020, and then I will have the first kind of show, which will be like just the wrap up of the last week or so of music, in the kind of the normal format you can expect on August 26th and our third episode, and we'll be doing weekly episodes from that point forward. If you are an artist or know an artist that's putting out albums, or that's putting out an album or an EP or a song, or you just want to make a genuine suggestion because you think this album deserves some attention and you want me to talk about it and review it and give my thoughts on it on the show, please email me at generaldistortionmedia@gmail.com, or send me a DM on Twitter or Instagram. Both are at Hey Johnny James. And again, thank you for listening. I think that's everything I have for this week. I hope you tune in to the next episode. And thank you for taking the first step. And I'm glad to finally be bringing this show back. And I hope to continue it for a really long time. So if you enjoyed it, again, thank you. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.